Hello survivors and welcome to First Aid Spray, a Resident Evil podcast by fans for fans. This is episode 77 of the show, and in this edition we take a direct flight into Harvardville to face down bioterror with the series' first CGI motion picture, Resident Evil Degeneration. My name is Sai, and joining me on the panel this week, I'm going to literally quote him for this one because it made me laugh so much. For just £3 a month you can give Leon a personality. It's Moist Owlet, aka James.
Greg!
Last seen waiting in Harvardville Airport holding one of those big signs that says Bloodborne 2 on it, for several years. It's Fire Button Steve Valance.
Oh wow, I feel so called out right now. Hi everybody.
And our special guest for this episode, she's an artist, a streamer, a podcaster, but none of these compared to the bravery of going to bat for RE6 in Crimson Head's Resident Evil Wars 2. It's Jen Von Lee.
Hello! I will fight anyone that says anything bad about Resident Evil 6, because it's the greatest game of all time.
First Aid Spray is recorded in front of a live Discord server audience, so join now to hear the show early and unedited and to become part of our wonderful little community where we discuss life, the universe and Resident Evil. You can find the server and all of our social media links at our website faspraypod.com, which is also where you can find our merchandise store, which has the brand new Praise the Moth t-shirt, and our Patreon page. First Aid Spray is nothing without our supporters. Tiers begin at just $1 a month with a host of benefits. Head over to patreon.com/FASprayPod to support the show. Housekeeping from us, we have I guess we should say we had a new Patreon, so thank you for your 1 month of support before you skedaddled. I'm going to say your name anyway because it's the nice thing to do. Lion Lockhart, thank you for your brief support. Thank you to everyone for your continued support. Patrons now have, as of yesterday, the latest episode of Tier Death Experience, which is Steve, Kelsey and Sherwin ranking every BOW from Resident Evil 2, both the original and the remake. It's a bit of a bumper episode, that one, so if you've got over 2 hours to spare, and if you're listening to First Aid Spray, you probably have a lot of 2 hours to spare, because that's kind of what we do. You can check that out now if you're a Mastermind Patreon. Meanwhile, over on our YouTube, we dropped the latest episode of Now That's What I Call Survival Horror, and I know I've said it before, but I've been waiting to do this one for a long time. It's Resident Evil Director's Cut Dual Shock, the top 10 tracks from that soundtrack, which, not enough people cover that, in my opinion, so it's always fun to dig into it. Let's cycle back round to our guest, Jen, who, as I've alluded to there, Steve and I previously worked with on the latest Resident Evil Wars on Crimson Head, but before we get to what you do as part of, the Resident Evil community and stuff like that, Jen, what was your first Resident Evil experience? How did you first get into the series?
Oh, I'm as old as the stars, so I got in on the ground floor. I got the very first game for my 16th birthday in 1996, and so I played that, and was like, yeah, that's a good zombie game. I'm into horror. This is cool. But I didn't really get into it until Resident Evil 4 came out. So I'm one of the rare species that's
nice.
Not all about the fixed camera and stuff like that. I kind of offer a different perspective on things. So yeah, I love the early games, but 4 is where I really became, this is my series.
And I say this every time. That's why I love asking that question, because everyone has like a really different story. It's really usually people who started at Resident Evil 1, as you say, most of them will go, yeah, those ones are my jam, so that's really unique.
Yeah, I was a Silent Hill fan
more
than I was a Resident Evil fan until 4 happened, and then I was like, oh, actually, no, this is the one. Because I'm kind of a more action-oriented player, so I like to be able to move around and shoot things very quickly, rather than being fixed on a path that I can go. Yeah.
Cool. And as I said at the top, there is a bunch of stuff that you do online, artwork. You're your own streamer. You also stream with various voice actors and Crimson Head podcast as well. I don't know if you want to talk about any of that stuff. So the floor is yours.
Yeah. I what do people want to know? I sort of stumbled into working with Nicole Tompkins on getting her stream off the ground in 2020. And she found out that I used to be a community manager for a WWE guy, and was like, oh, would you help me? And I was like, okay, this is fine. And I've been kind of her sidekick, Siri, voicing the clouds ever since, which has kind of led to Stephanie and Nick and Maggie all being like, can you help me? So I've kind of become this virus within the voice actor that just starts spreading from one to another. And then, like, I have Andre asking me if I can do things, and I'm like, I really have no more hours left in the day. I'm sorry.
I can imagine.
But I try to just help people and be quiet in the background, and except for Nicole, who wants me on shouting and telling her how to play games. So yeah, that's pretty much what I do. And then now it's all kind of like I'm trying to do my own thing and be like, I'm not used to being the person out front. I'm used to being the sidekick. So starting up my own stream, I started in October, is just like really nerve-wracking. And like, oh god, I have to be in front. But I'm trying, and we'll see how it goes.
Yeah.
It's going okay at the moment. I'm
funny.
playing Bloodborne on Monday.
Nice. I've seen you posting a lot about it, obviously, over the last few months, which is really cool, because I can relate to that somewhat in the sense that streaming isn't something that I'm necessarily 100% comfortable with all the time, especially by myself. But it's one of those things, isn't it, where it's like you kind of have to push yourself because it's good for your growth, as a creative person. You can't get better at something unless you do it.
Yeah. Eventually I want to stream my art as well, because obviously
cool.
I draw, but getting it, I'm like working with such a limited space that I don't quite know how to set it up where I could have my space to draw, because I'm a bit of a chaotic artist. I'm just like moving paper around all the time. I can't be one of those ones that just sits there in front of a piece of paper that's stapled to a wall. I can't do it. My paper's got to be upside down. It's got to be around the side. So, it's like, I'm trying to figure out how to do that, but I'm sure I'll figure it out eventually.
You, basically, like you were saying about fixed camera resi, you can't have fixed camera art stream. You need someone with a camera there to track your movement.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, I'm going to hire someone to come and film me draw.
Cool. Okay, let's jump into a rather brief edition of the Resident Evil news.
I don't know. We don't have a jingle. Why
we do have a jingle, Steve. You make one up, but we have one.
Yeah, it's enthusiasm. I'm just so excited. We've got such riveting news stories as Resident Evil 2 2019 is coming to Game Pass.
Yeah, we almost got through an episode without any news at all, but this literally was announced in the last couple of days.
There is an extra thing to this. If you are one of those crazy people who, I'm not using Steam, I'm not using the Epic Game Store, but I'm going to use the Xbox PC Store, RE2 2019 is going to be added to that as a technically new release. So, I guess you could argue that this is it's a win for more availability on PC platforms.
Yes.
But that's really it, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean,
I got so much to say about this.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I was just surprised that it wasn't already on Game Pass. It's literally about to turn 5 years old in a matter of weeks. So I'm shocked that it wasn't on there already. But okay, cool, I guess. Yeah, James, please add your enthusiastic opinion about this.
I do not.
Cool. Jen, any thoughts on Remake 2 on Game Pass?
Woohoo!
Fair enough.
I mean, I already have it on everything else, so I suppose I'll probably just download it on that as well.
So true.
Like, yay!
I'm one of those people that buys the games on like every platform if I can. Yeah. So I'm not a Game Pass user and I wouldn't need it anyway. But yeah, and Steve, as you said, in terms of the PC thing, like it's good that it's more available. But most people probably already have it at this point. Yeah. It's the best-selling game in the series, so.
Resident Evil Hoarders Unite.
I don't think it's like a distinction between it being, the Japanese have like the extreme violence version and the non-extreme violence
Z edition
version.
or whatever it's called.
Yeah, I think it is just like the version we all have, where violence occurs of the more gratuitous variety, which is, I suppose, a bit of a sort of not win for Japanese users. I could be wrong. I don't know.
Who knows? Anyway, yes, that's a thing now, apparently. Right, that's the news. Which takes us into quite a long-awaited episode, I think. We've done not a lot of digging into the CGI stuff, with the exception of the two most recent editions, as they've come out since we've been a podcast. So it makes sense to jump back to the beginning of Resident Evil CGI. Not quite. Sorry, Steve, it's not 4D Executioner. It's Resident Evil Degeneration. And now, reading the file Ramon's Confession from Resident Evil 4 2023, in character as Ramon Salazar, Henry Schultz, who you can find on YouTube at Henry Schultz VA.
My lord, bless the Salazar bloodline with an iron hammer. The founder of my family proclaimed the holy teachings of Los Iluminados evil and persecuted its followers. Not only that, he stole their most prized possession and sealed it below the castle. Oh, my beloved Lord Sadler, with divine grace, the wicked shall be reborn as a part of the flock, reborn as Ganado. Nothing would please me more than to sit at my lord's feet and bask in your splendor. I am your humble servant. You are my eternal light. To you, I swear my unwavering allegiance.
So, for context, Resident Evil Degeneration, as I said, the first CGI picture, like full-length Resident Evil motion picture, releasing in 2008, which I don't have it in front of me, but by this point there was 2, 3 of the live-action movies. So in a way, I guess it was quite exciting to hear that we were getting a in-universe Resident Evil film. At the time it released, it was the most recent point of the franchise, because the most recent game was Resident Evil 4, and this is set a year after it in 2005. And obviously since then we've had Infinite Darkness, which takes place a year after this, and gaps filled in and so on and so forth. It was the first time we'd seen Claire since Code Veronica. Leon was the poster child of the series at this point, I guess, coming off the back of the huge success of Resident Evil 4 a few years prior. And yeah, it's an interesting one. It's I don't really know how to sum up the plot. Like, there's an outbreak at an airport in Harvardville. There's a lot of political discussions about the safety of viruses and vaccines and companies involved with them in the wake of the Umbrella political scandal and all the legal stuff going on. And we jump into things with Claire and Leon, who is sent in to deal with the situation. So let's... I guess, actually, before we get into the story setup, the first inevitable question is, what was everyone's first experience with Degeneration? Do you remember seeing it for the first time? Jen, since you're the guest, do you remember your first interactions with Degeneration? Were you aware of it when it was brand new, or did you just kind of come across it after the fact?
You know what? I don't remember. Like that's just really useful bit of information there, but I don't remember when I first saw this. I think I must have seen it around the time it came out, because I've always been one of these people that's eager for the new thing. But yeah, it's one of those. It's a story that feels like it's always been there to me. So I'm guessing it's been a while since. Yeah, I have all the DVD collection and stuff like that. There's a DVD with extras and all the fun stuff in it that I have, which is ye oldie. So yes. Yeah, I mean, it must have been around the time it came out. Maybe somebody got it for me. I don't remember. I'm old and everything is very dusty in my brain. Yes,
I had to go in the big scary cupboard to get the DVD out to watch this, because I do own this on physical media, classic DVD style, as you say, and I'm pretty sure I got it from like CEX, which is a second-hand chain in the UK, but I feel like I must have seen it before that at some point. But yeah, I'm in the same boat. I don't really remember it being brand new. Maybe I wasn't necessarily that deep into the series in 2008, I guess. I'm not really sure. It's a weird one.
I'm trying to think. I think 2008 was just a weird year for me in general, so it's probably something that I saw and I was just like, okay, well, other things are happening, so...
Yeah, and we just covered Resident Evil 5, where I've said, I wasn't at my peak of interest with the series at that point, even though I played Resident Evil 5 to death when it came out with a friend. So I can very much see that this was probably something that was released, and I was like, okay, cool, I guess, and didn't pay that much attention to it. But Steve, do you remember your early interactions with Degeneration?
See, I would have been like early 20s, and I'm pretty sure I was just one of those like, oh man, anything with Resident Evil on it, I've got to have it. Like, I've just had my fill of S.D. Perry novel. And I'm not the biggest hater of CGI animated films in canon. Mostly at the time, I was a big lover of Advent Children and stuff like that. Yeah. So I just kind of just hoovered up and grabbed it straight away as soon as I could. I don't recall having any real deep thoughts on it at the time. Like, it was more, oh yeah, it's got Resident Evil on it, therefore Steve like it. I'm a little bit more sophisticated now, ladies and gentlemen. But, you know, at the time, I was a bit of an idiot. I still am to some people, but yeah. Yeah, but no, just I consumed it at launch. Occasionally, when I'm doing like a quote-unquote canon run-through, when I'm playing all the games that lead up to a new release, I will watch it after 4 before I do anything else. But it's more of a ritual thing, I think.
Fair. James, did you ever see or know about Degeneration before you got into the series recently? Recently-ish, I say recently. It's not recently anymore, is it?
Much to everybody's surprise, this is my first time. It was also a surprise to me because I thought I'd seen this movie before. Like, I thought I had seen it before, but I think because the RE CGI movies have such similar titles.
Yeah.
Like, prior to the most recent ones, they have very similar titles, so I think my brain got confused. But yeah, I'd never seen this, so this was my first experience. I've watched it 3 times now.
Fair enough. Okay, cool.
Unfortunately.
Let's get into the story then. As I say, we'll start there. We'll start more with the sort of first half and the setup and how we feel about, the Resident Evil in an airport, which is kind of the first act. There's an outbreak in the airport itself. There's an outbreak pouring out of a plane. There's a scumbaggy senator type, and various units converge, including Claire and Leon, recreating the get down moment amongst other stuff. Steve, how do you feel about the story setup for Degeneration?
Kind of weird. Like, Claire is just there. She's in the airport protesting it, but she's not with the other protesters. In fact, admonishes another protester. Leon doesn't actually really appear until halfway through the film. I do like the intro, though, generally speaking, where you're going through like a retelling of events, sort of, through lots of news reports. Like, they do it in Shaun of the Dead, don't they? But it's more a comedy in that case. But in this case, it's just setting various narrative beats and various things. And I thought that was really great.
Yeah.
And it even shows up to the terror safe protest at the Harvardville airport. But Claire's already inside, just sat chilling with her colleague, whose name I can't remember, and is just known as Aunt, and Rani. It's a weird one. I don't know how I feel, because it just feels terror safe might as well have not even been there.
Yeah, kind of.
Get Claire a child. She needs to have a child to be in charge of.
Where's the emergency child?
Where's Sherry right now? Oh, crap.
How do we get her a kid? Here, random terror safe person.
Have a child.
Yeah, it's a weird one. I don't mind the kind of slow start sort of thing, but it does feel a little odd. I'm with you though in that there is sort of a lot of catching up to be done at the start, and they do throw it's almost too much new information. It's just like so much at once, but I think they did it in a very clever way. And now this is mentioned. No, go on, Steve. I'll get into this later. But.
So there is a wild bit of strange nostalgia for me now here and that. You know, do you see the area with that just beyond that red tinted sky? And I don't immediately think of Degeneration. I think of the Crimson Head podcast.
Right, same. I heard it and I was like, oh yeah, I know that one. Hear that one on a regular basis. I've said before that the location of an airport is great for survival horror. So I've always had a bit of a soft spot for the first sort of half of this film because. Airports are spooky, especially working in one during the pandemic when there was no one in one. They were really kind of scary, and also, you know, lots of big, heavy locked doors and stuff like that. I thought it was always thought it'd be a great setting for a survival horror game. So it's cool to see that used a little bit here. James, how do you feel about the story setup of Degeneration?
Like Steve, like I really like the beginning, like the news on the ground stuff. Like the movies, the live action movies do it too. But they do it much worse because it's just Alice talking to you or talking at you, you know, while slides go across the screen. Whereas the correct way, like this movie did, is like we're going to show you what's happening and we're going to do it through like a real world kind of scenario.
Kind of.
Yeah. And although it was badly animated, like I feel like the news on the ground stuff was even a step down from the already mediocre animation in the movie for some reason, but like it did immerse me into the world, and I like movies that start like that. It feels like like you say, a lot more authentic for me. And also like a similar tack was taken with other Resis as well in that regard, and games as well actually. So they like doing that. But yeah, again, Steve's. I mean, we're probably going to mention it, but the reunion between Claire and Leon. What was that? Like, not like nothing went into the reintroduction. Like these two. This is the first time they've met, right? Like since Raccoon City, right?
Ooh.
And not.
I mean, that
Was
we've
it?
seen, but I think we are meant to assume that's not the case because they're in contact and stuff over Code Veronica. So
Yeah, they use
I don't know.
Facebook. They meet over Christmas.
But
Brand new
even
thing
then,
it was.
But even then, like they had that time in the tent, and they just had a little flashback, and I was like, I just wanted more. I wanted more from that. Yeah, and I'm sorry, but I knew almost immediately that I'm going to spoil everybody, but I knew immediately that Curtis was going to be used as a pawn here, like because you see, I'm going to call him Rhonda Davis. I can't remember his actual name.
Ron Davis.
I
think it's just
Rhonda Davis.
Senator Ron Davis.
Ron D. Davis. Yeah, that's his name.
Okay.
He was being like too much of like a bloody ghoul to be fully responsible for anything. Like he was being so obvious. And like the only guy it could have been was insert British accent guy.
Yeah.
I've said this once many times. As soon as you put a British guy into anything, he's immediately the evil guy. Other than the SD Perry books.
True. Yeah. Very true.
Yeah, and yet another pharmaceutical company was brought in, which made me go, ugh. I was kind of taken. Yeah, but I did like where they kind of went with it. It was cool. It's not the greatest start to a story. For me, it felt like they threw a bunch of characters into a box and then just shook it around really fast. And that's what we got. So, yeah.
It's a little bit of a checkbox ticking thing where it's like, Leon, we'll have him team up with Claire because they literally say in the DVD, there's like a documentary thing. It's like they picked Claire because Resident Evil 2 is like the best selling game of the franchise at that point. I was like, okay, that's a good enough reason as any, I guess. Just like you guys have kind of joked about, it's like, oh, that means we have to write a child character in because Claire is in this. But I'll tell you what, they didn't take the box of sticking Ada in arbitrarily, which is nice, which is something to get to as well. But yes, there's random companies, brand new companies inserted into this, but at the time, we weren't in the sort of deluge of that sort of thing. Like Terrace is quite early into this point of the lore, and TerraSave goes on to be quite important and stuff like that. So this is the first introduction of TerraSave. It's also, again, kind of pointed out by that documentary, the first real display of bioterror in the series. Because 4, I wouldn't really. It's not like an attack or anything. You go to some spooky place where there's a bunch of monsters, but this is where it's like we're using bioorganic weapons as weapons, as an actual terror attack, which is something that 5 and 6 would continue more so. So it's really interesting in that sense that Degeneration kind of, whilst it is a weird sort of smattering of different things, there's a bunch of stuff in here that actually kind of set up the next few games, or stuff that the next few games would continue to pursue in terms of that style. I really like the pace of the first half of it because it's got a lot of time to slow things down and do atmosphere stuff without dragging it out too much. Like, it's got spooky walk around dark rooms, shooting monsters, things could jump out at you moments. All the CGI films have a little bit of this, but I think Degeneration probably does it the best. I just kind of wish that it kept up like that. As always, of course, if this was just get out of the infected airport and figure out who's to blame, that could have been the whole thing for me, personally. So I think the first half is definitely the strongest bit for me, but as I say, maybe I've got a weakness for airport horror, whatever that is. Jen, how do you feel about the story setup for Degeneration?
I really like it. I'm a big fan of using just like news clips to set up things. I like it in movies. I like it in TV shows because it's like very real to me. It's news. We see it all the time, and it kind of gives a more thorough background as to what happened. Because at the beginning of RE4, you do get Leon explain how Umbrella collapsed, but this kind of lets you know a bit more about why they collapsed. Excuse me. So I like that. I like that it gives us a little bit more depth to Leon's spiel. And then, we get into the airport, and it has one of my personal favorite moments in a CGI movie. And that is when Claire asks for a weapon and is handed an umbrella. And she's like, oh, didn't see that coming. And I'm like, that's a cute little nod and a wink. And I really like what you did there. So yeah, I enjoy that bit. The senator is very obviously the bad guy. He looks like the penguin. Oh, excuse me. He looks like the penguin.
He does look like the penguin.
He does.
So I'm just like, well, there's our bad guy.
I literally watched it with my housemate, and I'm pretty sure she said that guy could be the penguin. So
yeah,
there you go.
Yeah, he's very much, he is the villain. And then you have dear sweet Curtis, who is, I don't know, what's he doing there? Something. Running around looking evil. Kind of looking evil, but obviously the decoy. Obvious decoy is obvious. I like it. I enjoy the beginning of Degeneration. And Leon's fantastic entry into the series, into the show, movie. That's the word I'm looking for. Where he stands there like a plank with his arms nailed to his side. What is movement? Who knows? I don't know. Let's take the most charismatic character in the series and remove all personality, and he can just stand there like a plant.
Which is the best part about that, of course, is that this is the first CGI thing, and they're like, we're going to put Leon in it, and then he appears in every single subsequent CGI production, and that's how they started off, as you say, with his arms like tied to his sides. Incredible stuff.
It blows my mind. I don't know what was going through. I mean, we'll obviously get more into that later, but I don't know what was going through people's minds when they did all of this.
Talking about the specific moments from early in the film that we like or don't like, there is one moment that throws me off every time. There's a I'm going to get weird about it now. There's a wrestling gif that you see every now and then where somebody takes the mask off of a guy in an audience, and underneath it's the guy. Like, for those of you who know wrestling, it's the gif with Sting, where someone's wearing a Sting mask, and underneath is the Sting face paint. And in this, there is a guy wandering around in a zombie mask, making zombie moans, and they take the mask off and admonish him. And then a real zombie shows up. Every time I watch it, though, I'm expecting a real zombie to be under the zombie mask. It's like, you missed a trick here. That would have actually been really funny, but... There you go. That's just a random thought that I have every single time I watch this film. Any more before we move into the later part of the story?
Well, speaking of TerraSave, I think it does quite a good job of introducing them as well as kind of the Greenpeace of the Resident Evil universe. So it's a good introduction to another side of the whole fight, because I think Leon says to Claire later on that she picked a different way to fight. Because Chris and Leon wanted to be all guns blazing and we're going to destroy everyone, and Claire's just not that person. So it kind of does a good job of defining all of that. She wants to fight it in a different way, and here's her gang, technically Greenpeace. You know, just we're looking out for the people and trying to make everything better, but inadvertently sometimes making things worse.
I think he calls her survivor, right?
I think so.
Yeah, which I found it is nice, but also I found it kind of strange because they're both survivors.
Yeah. She's a survivor of Raccoon City. She knows more than anyone else here, said the man who's also a survivor of Raccoon City. And what's going on here?
No, not this Leon.
He's talking her up, okay? We're all about, talking up our women here.
Yep.
Yeah, no, that's fine.
I also like his unreliable narrator moment, because we get a flashback, which is great. And also, I haven't checked, but one of the last times that we probably see Claire in her traditional RE2 outfit before they started like changing the shorts or whatever. But she's wielding a shotgun, which never happens. Which not to be that nerd, but I'm like, no, that's not right. It's not lore accurate.
Oh, and let's not forget her Neo in the Matrix bit.
Where she catches
Leon throws her the
gun,
and she does this kind of fantastic twirl Dante Devil May Cry sort of whoa kind of thing. I'm like, yeah, you go, girl.
Could never be
Chris
me.
has taught you well.
There's a reason why she's Greenpeace. She's too overpowered. She'd solve it in 5 minutes.
Indeed. Okay, cool. Let's move into the second half of the film then, where we get some. Get into the meat of things, I guess. We get to the dome facility. We have Leon and Angela Miller, who we haven't talked about yet, but the what's the unit called?
Special Response Team.
That's it, SRT, Special Response.
We couldn't
Team
afford SWAT this week.
AKA, how do we get Laura Bailey into the CGI thing? Because we need Laura Bailey in the CGI thing.
Basically, and there's definitely things to be said about that. So they go and visit.
I just want to say for the future that her name is Angeline Dion.
Angeline Dion, I love it.
Because she looks like Celine Dion.
She does a little bit. Yeah, we'll get to her character.
I have a question for the podcast. Is it every time the camera's on Angela that it's just a softer focus or something?
Yeah,
like she has this weird. I don't like using the word aura, but she's like got some kind of weird visual effect going on where it distorts things, and she just has a softer image and everything. I think Leon's kind of got it too, but compared to like Frederick,
the pretty people filter.
She's the Leon love interest, so she has to be in soft focus.
Yeah, she's glowing.
Yeah, we want to tease that Leon Kennedy has a heart, so we're gonna like. How can
but
we
never
make
actually
him
let him,
human?
emote.
I know, love interest that isn't Ada. Ooh. Yeah.
Yes. So we also visit Curtis Miller's home, find out about a bit of backstory with where he's the widower of a family that died in the Raccoon City incident, which has potentially turned him a bit extreme. Let's put it that way. And oh no, crazy things are happening at a big lab. Didn't you know this is a Resident Evil CGI film? How do we feel about the second half of the film? Steve, I'm going to go to you again to start, because for me, I feel like things take a bit of a... Well, I mean, the pacing takes a shot for a little while, and then things pick up, but it's just where things take a weird turn.
You know how Infinite Darkness was a TV show, right? This actually does feel like it would have been a two-parter, literally.
Yeah.
It literally is the second half of the film is devoted to this big bio air lab. It's okay, right? But if we've been rocking like a steady 7 out of 10 up until this point, it's veering downwards. It's going. There is a negative downswell, and it's noticeable. As much as I love having Frederick Downing on screen, because to me, it's like, what if Wesker didn't have superpowers and was a complete coward?
Yeah.
Like that, the antithesis to the supervillain of the series is just this meek British man who's actually sneaky. But yeah, it's just generic lab that could have been in Resident Evil 5, really, if you squint, with the whole lab's falling down and. It's
Agree.
okay.
Yeah, I don't think the lab is nearly as interesting as the team that made it wants it to be.
Yeah.
It's not. It's just like, okay, it's a lab and it's dome shape and the floor falls out, I guess. Like, I don't really get what then they make a big deal out
in
of
the game. It would have been actually a fun setting going through 4 separate labs and then seeing it unfurl into a bigger, larger complex. But as a movie, you don't really see that. You just see a floor plan and go, it's a bit neat,
Have it
I guess.
explained at you rather than see too much of it. Yeah, I agree. Like, I actually enjoy the first half of the movie infinitely more than the second part for me. Jen, how do you feel about the second half of Degeneration?
I mean, I'm just a shameless fangirl. I love the sort of the fan service that's thrown in for for the fans that enjoy Mr. Leon Kennedy, with like, here's a little love interest, and then you've got Angela, who is Curtis's brother, because we have to have that kind of Curtis's sister. We have to have that, I don't know, extra bit of drama for no reason. But I guess there is the blood connection thing that's necessary. So yeah, that makes sense. I like all of that. Yes, it slows it down, and we have a lot of Leon standing around with his arms glued to his sides again. But yeah, I like it. And upon watching the documentary again, because I refreshed my brain on that one, they wanted. Originally, the labs were going to be just like your more generic labs, but the guy wanted it to be, the director wanted it to be like a Thunderdome kind of arena in which Leon and Angela were going to fight Curtis. And so that's why they made it this great big dome with lots of plants and everything for reasons that we could have floors collapse and it'll look cool. Yes.
Yes. James, how do you feel about the second half of the story?
Like the games, like the second half, like the game, it really feels like the second half is like the second half of a game.
Yeah.
Like, it ramps up, the action starts up, like all the stakes kind of supposedly get higher, except my stakes were not getting any higher. They were at rock bottom at this point during the movie. It's really long. I remember looking at the viewfinder when it started, like when we went to the lab and there was still half of the movie to go, I was like, whoa. What's gonna happen? What's going on here? And that was when I'm gonna call him Gertis, G. Curtis, turned up.
Gertis.
Gertis. Yeah, and there was still half of the movie to go, and it kind of surprised me. They were also doing a lot of trying to shake you off who the villain was, with a lot of wibbly wobbly writing. Again, I was like, "It's the British guy! Come on!" He just phoned up Claire and then said, "Oops, Miss Call," puts it down.
Would you like some tea?
Ding dong. Yeah. So, and also, like, after, like, everything felt a little bit like out of place after the beginning. Like, the problems I had with the beginning kind of just accelerated with the other half. And after watching the documentary, it made a little bit more sense, because there's some folks, I can't remember their names right now, so I apologize, but like, some folks were aiming for a sequel to RE2 and others were aiming for a sequel to RE4. And they're completely different games. Even like the theme is completely different. So like what we got and what we got really wasn't any of either. So I wasn't like, I saw references in there.
Yeah.
Like there were a lot of them, but yeah, it was its own thing in a way, which is, it could be a testament to it. It did get me thinking though, like my biggest problem with it, and with other Resis of this time, especially of that time, and even to this point, I'm going to get a little bit real here, but it's the word terrorism being used. During this time, it was a word that was really like kind of revolving around the world with no actual evidence behind it other than bad people are bad or greedy, you know? Often third world countries are used or perceived enemies of the US, which we see a lot in Resident Evil. As a story writer myself, a compelling story has layers, something we like to escape from. But when you use real world events and stand-ins, you do have a responsibility to tell an honest story. Degeneration, though, isn't the only culprit of this, as I said at the beginning, but it did give Curtis a reason for giving his life and potentially killing everyone in that lab. But it didn't give one for General Grande, and I think that's a misstep, right? And other people, like, he's just this shadow person in the background. I do think that needs more just substance in the future. You need to give a reason, right? And other people may listen to me and go, it's not that deep. But I think it is, because when you're selling millions to people, you have a responsibility for these kind of stories. But yeah, overall, I thought the story for this movie was serviceable if it was a video game. Because we're going to run into that same problem again, where should it be a video game or should it be a movie? And you get it with the games as well. Should the game be a movie instead? Like, and that's not just Resident Evil. I think Degeneration should have been a video game, not a movie, because it feels like one.
Actually, there was a video game tie-in for this on the phones.
Oh,
yeah.
On the phones, yeah, it wasn't great. It was basically a RE4 if you squint very badly.
Okay.
I think it's mostly just the airport segment as well. Yeah, I don't think it's actually the Will Farmer bit. But you're right. That would have given like room for like files and stuff to flesh everything out.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot going on outside of the realms of our protagonists in this film.
Yeah. I'll go over more of that about that later on as well. I did feel extremely disconnected with this movie though. But it is still one of the best CGI stories out there. Which goes to show how Capcom could improve in the future. But going by, this was 15 years old now.
Yeah, I think I'm inclined to agree with that. And as you guys have just said, there's a lot below the surface with this that doesn't unfortunately get that much explored. Like we talked about the introduction of TerraSave. I think Will Farmer are the most forgettable company in Resident Evil existence, because they literally, I think, pretty sure it's just this. I'm not sure they ever really get mentioned again, ever, which is a shame. In a sense,
they're just a setup, aren't they?
Yeah, basically they're just a prop for the rest of the films to sort of lean on a little bit. There's a lot of, even if it's obvious and that kind of stuff, there is some interesting characters in here that, if it were a video game and you got to spend a bit more time with them, or thinking about them, or hearing from them, or just sort of meter out the moments that you spend with them with gameplay sections, it could actually be something really good. But the pace is a bit all over the place in this. I think the second half of the film is definitely weaker, but the big final fight is pretty cool. As got a weakness to G-Virus because as an RE2 super fan, but I really like the final showdown.
You have to kind of give them a bit of props, though, for knowing who their audience is. Because, the plot is really convoluted. There's an awful lot of details that if you were just an average Joe that doesn't really know much about Resident Evil and you just put this movie on, you're going to miss most of the story. You're just going to be like, oh, monsters, this is fun. Pew, pew. But it goes there for the people that are in Resident Evil games reading every little leaflet. We're reading all the scraps of paper. We're reading everything we find. We're going deep into the lore. And it kind of echoes that, I think, in a movie. I mean, does it work? Who knows? But we're echoing that. We're going to give you lots of little details that you can pay attention to or not. And we're also going to give you an action movie. So if you don't care about the little details, then that's fine. You've got people fighting a monster, and that's great. You do your thing. So I think it kind of caters to... It is trying its best to cater to the Resident Evil fans, and then it's also catering to the people that just want a silly action movie with just monsters and pew pew and Leon doing acrobatics.
As with many things, it's of course your mileage may vary, I suppose, isn't it? Depends what you want to get out of it. If you want a dumb movie, then maybe it's okay for that. If you want details, maybe it's okay for that. Because I do think we should applaud the fact that it does add. We said it multiple times, lots of interesting things to the lore. It's the first time we see X, Y, and Z, and at the end we see Tricell for the first time. And again, not a company that... They do have a bigger impact on the wider lore, but we don't have a lot of games that actually feature them. But as a fan, watching it back and seeing the Tricell guys at the end and it being like a big setup for something, it feels like a big deal. It's like that's for, the lore fans and the big Resident Evil fans. So stuff like that's really, really cool. So I'll give it that much.
That, and it caters to people like me who like a bit of soap opera, because I'm all about the characters when it comes to Resident Evil. I'm not so big on lore. I know it, and I'm not an encyclopedia of lore, but people jog my memory and go, oh yeah, I remember that. I've taken that in. But I'm more about I love it for the characters, and so anything that involves giving the characters a bit more, giving them a bit of a human outside of what's going on, I like. And I love that they really did that with Claire, I think, a lot more in this than they did Leon. It's kind of unfortunate that they didn't go more into it with Leon, but hey, whatever. We're just he's just Plank, that's fine. But I like that they did that. They gave it a bit more, and I'm there for the soap opera, which is why I don't mind the second half quite so much. Because give me the soap opera, give me the love interest, give me the silly underwater kiss. It's Leon giving her all. Do you know how long they are underwater for?
Did you time it?
They're down there for like 4 minutes, and I'm like. And then he shoots a gun underwater as well, which, as far as I know, is that not a thing? I don't think that's a thing. I don't know anything about guns. I'm British, but as far as I know, that's not a thing.
These are Leon bullets.
It's a special gun.
It's a special Leon Kennedy gun.
Yeah.
Government
Ghost Water Edition.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So not only does he give Angela all of his breath, because she gets, I don't know what happens, she gets knocked out or something, and as they float down, she's just like, help me, I'm so helpless and pretty and beautiful. and Leon's like, here, let me give you all of my oxygen via a kiss, and then we'll also stay down here for 4 minutes and have the gumption to be able to fire this gun through this bulletproof glass, which isn't all that bulletproof. That's definitely a moment, but I am here for it. Give me all the idiocy. I love it.
Sorry, the chat I've just given us, it's now called the Wet Elder.
Love it.
Yeah. Oh my god.
Yes, there is I'm really excited to get into characters because there's a lot of things to say, bad and good, definitely. It's a really interesting one for characters. But on a last note for story. Not necessarily to get too, anyone can get as deep as they want into the weeds as they'd like. But obviously, I think this is an interesting one for Degeneration because amongst everything else, outside of Resident Evil 2, this is the only other G-Virus story in the entire series. And we're probably going to cover the G-Virus as a whole later this year. in its own episode. But I think it's worth, talking about how we feel about it as a G-Virus story, because it's a big important part of the lore that we don't go back too much, mostly because the G-Virus is ridiculous and would destroy everything if it broke out. So to have it suddenly announced that, I've got a sample of the G-Virus, by the way, how did we feel about it doing that? And, the Angela Miller and Curtis Miller connection that you've mentioned, Jen, them being brother and sister. I like that as the G-Virus has to do the sort of looking for the same DNA thing, squicky stuff. So this is a cool, different way to do it rather than
so
a familiar
wrong.
thing. Yeah, well, I know, but it's
I
meant
really
to make
think
you
the G-Virus
uncomfortable.
is the most disgusting of all of the...
It's a
just
virus. It can't help it.
I need to impregnate my own child. I need to impregnate my own sister. It's when Leon says to Angela, what is it? Something along the lines of he's looking for you for breeding
Looking to
potential or something. I'm like,
Yeah.
Yeah, it made me cringe.
It's pretty gross.
if I was Angela, I would be so far over the hills. I'd be like, okay, bye.
James, how do you feel about it as a G-Virus story?
First of all, I want to say this is a great question, Sai. Like Sai put this up. I think it's a really good question because G. Curtis doesn't really add anything.
Guess.
Like he doesn't really add anything to the origin of the G virus
Right.
or the nature of the G virus, and I think that's a really big missed opportunity. However, he has a really cool second form.
Yeah, he does.
Like that second form made me want to go, okay, why did it turn into like an insectoid mantis like looking thing? Like, but we learned nothing, and that's why there's another kind of example why maybe it should have been a video game as well, because we could have got more information, or the film could have explained it in some way. Because we kind of got like Birkin, we kind of got G virus constantly mutates, right? And in the original games and the remake, you got that it's a constantly evolving, mutating thing. And yeah, it could have been. It could be vaguely explained away with through way of like downing and whatever they were doing in that lab. Like he could have been, in the back rooms doing his own little experiments. But it's the good thing is that it's a continuation of, we've mentioned this before, it's a continuation of Leon and Claire's story.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a Leon and Claire story. So that's a really cool connection there. And like the biggest misstep with this G virus, with Gertis, is they didn't kill it by hitting it in the weak spot. He hit it in the head. Like, you should go for the big old eyeball, man.
That's true. They did stab him in the eye, which was nice because obviously that's a thing that happens in Remake too. So
yeah,
it's kind of funny.
Yeah. Plus, knife is really good against him, right?
The animation of that eyeball was really interesting. It looked like it was animated differently to the rest of the movie. Almost like it was a photograph or something like that. But also it has a great moment with that eyeball, like one of the most hilarious things I think I've seen in one of these movies. It's a tiny little moment, but there's a photograph of Curtis's family dropped, and he picks it up with his huge, great fingers. But instead of looking at it with his face, he shows it to his big eyeball.
Yeah.
His
little
big
pet.
eyeball kicks in. I'm like, oh, so it does work. It is a working thing, and not just some kind of...
Yeah, true.
See, I kind of really love that bit.
Yeah.
Like, it's the last bit of himself resisting doing anything messed up, isn't it? And he's like freaking out. You can tell the eye is like its own sentient presence, for want of a better term.
Yeah.
And they're fighting for control. I love that stuff. Yeah.
Steve, how do you feel about it as a sort of... Do you think this is a worthy G-Virus story?
I actually feel like it's barely present besides the boss fight,
Yeah, I don't disagree with that.
Like, don't get me wrong, I think, Form 1's okay if it's a bit like, what if Birkin got really huge in 5 seconds? Wham! Oh, all right, there we go. I think, generally speaking, Form 2's where it's at, though. It's a vastly different creature to what we got in 2 and 2 Remake. But it has, still got a massive shoulder with an eye in it, so you can tell it's, on brand. Kind of reminds me of the Jabberwock, in a way.
Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah, that weird leatheriness to it. Generally speaking, doesn't really do much except take out a load of military dudes and has a big kick-ass tail from somewhere. Yeah, if G's meant to be spontaneously weird like that, then that's fine. But I always saw it as more of a response to trauma. Right, this part of my body got ruined by bullets, therefore this becomes and grows back stronger. I'll take it or leave it, really. It could have been any monster, though. Like, he doesn't do anything particularly G-Virus related, although it's implied he was going to if he didn't get stopped.
Yeah, I guess that's probably the most important thing, yeah.
He could have been, this is Super Tyrant magical serum, and now I'm a tyrant. Look how tyrant I am. And now we could have gone, okay, cool.
Yeah,
neat.
There's so much, I feel like there is so much more they could have done with this. Like, if they could have made it, they should have made it more central to the plot if they're going to use it, because the G-Virus is still kind of special. It's not been overused or whatever, and it's not been taken full advantage of. And there are a couple moments that we've all said about, the implication of Angela and stuff like that, and it's chasing her down, which is, ties it back to the original RE2 G-Virus story and that kind of thing, which is neat. Just like I said about the airport thing, like, probably should have been its own entire movie. Maybe this should have been its own entire thing as well. It would have been cool to have a G-Virus centric film, but it does kind of, it comes late into the picture. We don't get a lot of time to sort of ruminate on it. That said,
yeah,
I'm with you guys. I think the designs are cool looking at the very least. And now, reading the file Mercenary's Diary from Resident Evil 3 Nemesis, Aaron Shaw, who you can find on TikTok at Aaron_Shaw.
September 1st. Following 6 months of intensive training, my body's edge had returned. I was a good soldier, but they ordered my execution with no reason given. I was tortured and forced to give a false confession. But on the morning of my execution, a miracle happened. The company had helped me out, giving me a second lease on life. September 15th. I ended my vacation short and returned to the HQ office. It looks like my UBCS unit's been called into action. Umbrella maintains its own paramilitary unit to counter corporate terrorism and VIP abduction. In addition, they have nightmen who specialize in handling problems caused by illegal products. I'm currently a member of the latter. September 28th. Dawn's here, but we're still slogging through this nightmare. There are no provisions of any kind here. The undead just walk the streets feeding upon the flesh of the living. Given the choice again, I would honestly rather have been executed. Death Row was a heavenly asylum compared to this place. I've chosen to pull the trigger myself, in the hope that my dead body won't come back to life.
Okay, cool. Let's dig into characters then. Jen, why don't you start us off? Let's talk about the sort of two major, our video game returning heroes with Leon and Claire. What are your thoughts on? We've touched on it, but how you feel about those characters in this film?
The dichotomy of this movie is that they did a great job with Claire. I think I like that she's also wearing. It's probably my favorite outfit of the Claires. Like, I really like it. I'm all about the denim and but they gave her a personality and they gave her more to work with, but as well as being a babysitter, because she's terminally a babysitter. What is Claire if not looking after a child? But yeah, I don't know. I don't really understand why they were like, we're going to do lots more with Claire, and we're going to make her upset about everything that's happening, and we're going to make her emote, and we're going to have her be animated, and then we're going to have Leon, who has just been through the biggest trauma of his life, stand there like a plank. We're just not emoting at all, and just being like, I try to reason with it in my own head as he is so traumatized by what happened in 4 that he's just kind of shut down. And now he's on autopilot. That's where my brain goes. But yeah, characterization-wise for those two, they went all in with Claire, and they didn't really. I don't know. I don't know what they were doing.
It's a weird one because part of my brain almost wants to sort of justify it as maybe that's what was cool at the time, sort of stoic, straight line mouth, no emotion, badass kind of thing. But it doesn't really make any sense, as you say, because we've just come out of RE4. Obviously, the game had released years prior, but this is set a year after, where he's wisecracking Leon S. Kennedy.
Quip Master Supreme. Where did he go?
Exactly. Who's this guy?
Not a single quip or pun was made in this entire movie, and I feel robbed.
Yeah, that's very weird. And especially because now, and I know obviously at the time they wouldn't have known this, but the context of it now, Steve, you said if you're doing like a lore run, if you were to play everything and watch everything in serious order that it all takes place, you get Infinite Darkness after this, where he does have some quips back. He's sort of a bit more in the middle at the very least. So it feels even weirder that he's just this kind of like boring, and I feel like it's a voice direction thing, because there's a lot of places where it sounds like his lines are being like the pace of his lines is all over the place. Like there are a bunch of times where it just felt like he's rushed his line out. He had too much to fit in. Maybe it's the translation. I don't know. It's really
very weird. And what's even weirder is that they obviously removed, because if you watch the documentary thing, you've got the actor who isn't the voice actor, but the person that's just doing the performance capture, and he's really emoting. He's animated. He's making expressions with his face. He's acting like, and then they've just taken it all away. They're just like, no, we're just going to have him stand there with his arms glued to his side and just, blank faced. So I'm just going to go with, in my head, he's really traumatized. He's working through it. He's just on autopilot now.
He was really tired that day.
And then when he got home, he got some therapy, he got laid, and then he was back to form for Infinite Darkness. So, it's just like...
Indeed. Steve, let's go to you. What do you feel about Leon and Claire in this film?
I mean, when it comes to Claire, I'm in total agreement with Jen. I think it's one of her best performances. I love the outfit. I love the personality and character. Arguably, the first half is Claire's movie, and then Leon just shows up at the end. And then the second movie, Claire still saves the day by keeping them from falling to the doom and all that stuff. So, MVP, Claire Redfield, as always, as she should be. Leon suffers from, I don't know, I feel like the early 2000s, a lot of franchises were taking established characters and rewriting them and making them rubbish. Like we had Advent Children, Cloud Strife, Devil May Cry 2, Dante, Resident Evil Degeneration, Leon. And it's not like they're acted poorly, it's that they're just like, be stoic and miserable, that's cool. Like, no, dude. We know Paul Mercier can do a bang-up job of making Leon a charismatic and fun guy. While also taking things mostly seriously. He even does, I think, a few. I don't know if there's many quips in Dark Side Chronicles, but he's a lot livelier there. So I'm gonna put Leon's direction purely on the voice direction for this, not Paul Mercier. The script was bad, lame, making him a stoic, quiet, just unenjoyable for me. And I'm a big fan of Leon Kennedy in most of his interpretations. This is the one time he's checked out. He's not here. He's just got a really bad pay packet, and he really doesn't care. All right. So the government are paying me how much? Oh, overtime money is that much. The tax man's had how much? Right. I'm going to come to Harvardville. I'm going to shoot some zombies, and I'm going home. I'm going to scrub this virus from the face of the earth. Leon said, with all the emotion of a stone. That sounds like you would say it with conviction, with rage or something. Not. Oh yeah, I'll have a chip and 2 sausages, please. It's just not cool. I don't know. It really annoyed me in other games where they do this as well. But I guess Leon got off somewhat lightly as he comes back to form in other shows and other games. But here it's worst.
In Damnation, he's back to he's even sent into a war zone without any breakfast, and he's in a better mood. He's he's quipping like crazy. In that movie. So I don't know. I think it was an off day. I think he's traumatized. That's just what I'm going with. He's just can't deal.
No. Whereas Claire, peak, arguably one of the best Claires we've ever had, ever. She's also the melee enthusiast. She's got lamps. She's got umbrellas, coat rack. She'll use anything as a weapon, and she'll kick people and shoot people really, really well. 10 out of 10.
She has
the MVP of Leon's performance is his knee holding him and Angela and Mr. Curtis on that rail. That like, can we talk about that for a minute? He's dangling there for like another 4 minutes, just by his knee, holding the weight of 2 other people and himself.
The strength comes
Leon's
through that
knee.
scowl.
Yeah, Leon's knee is the charisma king of this movie.
It's
Let's go, Leon's knee.
It's funny because like they kind of have obviously, and Jen, you alluded to this, like very defined roles in this film. Kind of like this is the moment where we really got we hadn't really seen Claire for about 8 years, like as in terms of a new story. So this is the first one where it's like, yes, she's the protector rather than the outright fighter. She's the person that comes in after the fact rather than being a frontline person like Leon and like Chris. So she gets to do sort of the investigation part of the story and deal with other characters, while Leon is, being a love-struck puppy, I guess, with Angela and fighting a big monster. But at the end of the film, despite her being the sort of detective part of it, it's Leon that's like, oh, I figured out it was him already, which is really kind of dumb. But thankfully, as you've all pointed out, yes, she gets to do a bunch of cool stuff. She gets to slap Senator Davis in the face, which is,
the slap.
very cathartic. And catching a loaded handgun with one hand, as you do. She's
while
obviously
kicking
great.
something in the face, Si.
Yes.
While kicking someone in the face, MVP.
Exactly. Yeah, she's great in this. The performance is great. Alison Court as Claire is, it's always a bit like a warm blanket, isn't it? So, but she did a really, really good job at this one. James, how do you feel about Leon and Claire?
So Leon has a really weird personality in this, and it's like, so you could argue this is how action stars were said in that were written and portrayed in action movies, except in action movies the personality is getting to see more than just the action. Like the strong silent type, it only works if you get a glimpse into who the person is and what makes them what they are. And what's weird is that this movie does have moments where where there's clearly meant to be a long stare where he's meant to be contemplating, but because of the look on his face, you just can't see it. So all he's doing is staring creepily. It's really weird. He's not even Leon in this movie. For me, it's just and as Jen said earlier on, the mocap was really active and his face is like very emotive and stuff. But I don't know. Maybe they got lost halfway. Trying to translate that and just thought standing Leon was better. So Claire is amazing. I will cheerlead for her in this movie, and I'm not known online as the Claire stan. I think everybody knows, but she does more in this movie than anywhere else that's in the CGI movies. Like, she does more action than anywhere else. Her comment about the umbrella, her sick moves protecting that kid, her Unix system skills, her bitch slapping Rhonda Davis, she was great. She filled this movie with personality that it desperately needed, because nobody, even though we had big characters like Rhonda Davis, Downey. Right, they still didn't. I'll get into that in a second, but they still didn't feel like they had enough. But she filled the corners that we needed.
Mm-hmm. On that note, then, actually, we'll do the rest of the characters. James, do you want to kick us off? How do you feel about the rest of the cast of this film?
There were other characters other than Claire and Leon.
Yeah, you just named some of them.
I don't know. I feel like I made them up in my head as I was going, because that's how I feel like they wrote this film. It's like Angelina Dion is she is the perfect shoe-in of a character to give Leon a love interest for some reason. As Jen said earlier on as well, she's voiced by the beloved Laura Bailey. I love her so much. She did the best of what she could, but this writing was awful for her. She was a step up for Leon once again. A record that's constantly on repeat, and a mechanism for us to get invested in hers and Curtis's past. She wasn't interesting. I couldn't connect with her because of that. And then the icing on the cake was that final scene where they put her in a flowery dress on a hill for some reason, and they increased her breasts by 2 sizes. Like, I didn't get it. Why'd you need to do that? She says, "Oh yeah, I'm just gonna get up this morning, have my bacon and eggs, get in my car, and go to the lab. I forgot my flowery dress and my push-up bra."
No one else got changed, by the way, so she's the only one who did have a shower after all this.
Yep.
Oh man, I think
you know why she was putting that push up. I mean, I feel you, Angela, girl. I would do the same. I've just met Leon Kennedy. He's just saved my life.
Yeah, she's like, Leon, just wait here. I need to come home and refresh and come back.
What's ironic is that she was facing away from him almost that entire scene.
Fair.
Oh, Leon, he can't even see a boob.
I think everyone else played the role they're meant to play, but it didn't go any further than that in this movie. I've got nothing else to say because everyone was a stand-in other than Claire.
Yeah, I'm mostly on a similar page in terms of I don't have a lot of notes for everyone else. I thought, Angela was. I actually quite enjoyed her. It's not the most nuanced character of all time, of course, but I think they did a decent job with the hardened soldier with a bit of a gooey centre, and it's nice to see her do sort of kind of both of that. It was a little bit more the latter than the former. I wish she had a few more kick-ass moments herself. But as someone who's very openly at this point an Ada Wong hater, it is nice to see Leon have chemistry with another woman. I wish we would have seen more of that, and I'm always a little bit bitter that she never came back, even though she kind of did, because Laura Bailey's character in RE6 is essentially the same person. Downing, yeah, Steve, you said it, he's a bit like, scheming Wesker light. He's fine. He's the adequately dull English villain to sort of pivot to as the so-called twist of the piece. I think he's kind of, he's boring, but it is at least more interesting than Ron Davis being the bad guy, which is so obviously what the film is like. He's a bad guy, look, he's mean to everyone, but he's not the guy behind it all. And Curtis doesn't really matter because he doesn't really get enough screen time. Like, you feel a little bit for him, but because he's so peripheral to everything until he becomes a monster, he's just kind of a plot drive rather than a character to me. Jen, how did you feel about everyone else in the film?
I think all of you are forgetting the star of the show.
Is it Greg?
And that Greg.
Yeah.
Yes, Greg!
Greg! I have a vague issue with how they deal with Angela and Greg in the beginning of this whole thing, because it seems to be an ongoing theme with Resident Evil in that we have these global events that happen all the time, and yet nobody knows what it is. And at the beginning, you've got Angela and Greg who have no idea what a zombie is, and I'm like, well, hang on, you know about Raccoon City, that's obviously happened. Stuff in Spain must have made the news. I mean, there's even I can't remember where I saw it, but there's a book or there's something with pictures of Leon talking to the press. So the events of Resident Evil 4 are out there. The events of Raccoon City are out there. I know there's a cover-up, but it's out there, so why don't they know? Why are they like, what is a zombie?
They have that moment, don't they, where they're like, someone mentions Raccoon City and one of them goes, isn't that where such and such? If a US town got blown off the map by a nuke, everyone in the world would know the name of that town. It annoys me when they do that, but there you go.
And there's the scene in the office where Leon shoots one of the zombies, and Angela's shocked and appalled that he's shooting civilians. And I'm like, I want to grab her and shake her and just be like, yeah, you must know this stuff, surely.
Yeah.
If you ever watched it, you're in, what is it, Special Response Team? What have you been responding to?
It's in trees.
Absolutely nothing so far, apparently, because you don't know what anything is. So you're not that special. But, other than that, I'm here for it. I like Angela as the love interest. It's fine. It's fine. If it can't be me, then I guess it can be her. And Greg is... I like how quickly Greg comes around to everything. He's just like, yeah, I'm going to... Excuse me. I terrible with my swearing. I need to stop it. But anyway, yeah, you've got him like, yeah, I'm gonna kill all these things and let's go. And then he immediately accepts his fate. He's bitten. He knows he's done. He's like, you guys go.
Yeah.
I'm gonna deal with this. I like that. I like that he's just like, yeah, okay, all right, then this is what we're dealing with, and I'm in. So Greg was cool. He was a cool small character that
I found
better.
I found the trope with him very funny, because like there is a trope that annoys me in movies and stuff and whatever else media that has it, and it's the very brash character who then comes around, but as soon as he comes around he dies. Like it always the same thing every time, you know. As soon as he put his thumb up to Leon, I was like, this guy's dead, he's gonna die. Like, and within minutes he's dead. Yeah, it's a funny trope.
Yeah, good guys, good guys. And as for the rest of them, sorry, I'm rambling, but yeah, Curtis is just there. The Penguin is also there. And yeah, I mean, who else even is there? Oh, the aunt. Let's not forget aunt. She's
also there.
She's great. And Rani, she's really annoying. My God, could they have made that child a bit more annoying? Like, just for goodness sake, get a grip, girl.
Yeah.
I don't care that you're 6. Get over it.
You're emergency child 6.
That's all right. Yeah, just fill your role and get on with it. Steve, how do you feel about the rest of the cast?
Oh god, this it's hard to pull a pin on that grenade. Right. So I'm in total agreement. I think Rani as Discount Sherry is like not good. My parents left me. You're gonna leave me to. I'm going outside with an umbrella. It's fine. Did you not see me kick the crap out of that guy earlier? I'm good. I actually really am a big fan of Ron Davis being an absolutely obvious slimeball, irredeemable scumbag. There's not enough of those in video games. You know, President Shinra. We need more evil. I'm just a complete. You know, the way that Claire clocks him around the jaw is also fantastic. I actually am a big fan of the low calorie Wesker. I want him to show up eventually, like, you know, as the mysterious villain behind the scenes, and immediately get knocked aside by, like, you know, another villain who's more competent.
That'd be cool.
Yeah. As the, oh my god, I'm the twist villain. Not really. That kind of madness. Everyone else is really, really forgettable. I kind of wish there's an alternate cut of this film where we actually get Angela and Greg to be characters, because Greg, as basically the Hudson of the film, you know, just without the tech skills, James. Yeah, I know. He's not that good. But, yeah, no, I actually, as the man who goes through a lot of emotions in the space of 10 minutes, I felt for Greg more than I did anybody else. That says a lot, really. Angela and Curtis, though, completely superfluous.
Yeah.
As it's meant to be Helena Harper light, as people like to see one and the other as the same character, I just don't see it. Helena's a grieved woman. Angela's just kind of like a hothead who goes from that to, oh no, my brother, the end. Curtis is a cardboard cutout with Patsy written on the back side of it. Like, it's not much to him. And as for the underlying plot about General Grande doing terrorist attacks all over the globe, we don't really see any of that, like James said. So he's not even really a character. Hunnigan's in it. She's nice. Yeah. She helps everybody. She gets the vaccine out to people. She technically does the most important thing in the entire damn film.
Hunnigan is the most consistent character in the whole of Resident Evil. She really is. She looks the same. She's been wearing the same suit for 20 years. She is consistency personified. And also, I would like to give a special shout out to Angela's push-up bra at the end, because I think that's an MVP character.
I'm really glad that Hunnigan got a mention, though, because it is worth it. And as you said, like, that actor has played Hunnigan so many times, so it's nice for her to show up in this as well.
Yeah, technically, we discovered this, like, from RE4 all the way through to Death Island. She now has the longest recurring rank of a voice actor in the Resident Evil universe. Yeah, that's pretty cool.
Only been played by one other person because of the remake. Otherwise, it's been the same actress the entire time.
I mean, other than that, like, I really wish we'd actually seen someone assassinate Ron Davis. That would have been you know, like in Rogue One, we get the Vader cameo, don't we? Where it beats the crap out of everyone at the end, and then, oh god, it's so cool. And that's the point where you put Wesker in a film, and he just shoots that man dead and then buggers off.
Yeah,
that would have been chef's kiss. I mean, death off screen's okay too, I guess, but
We were robbed.
Hashtag recut Degeneration, the Greg cut.
The Greg cut. I just wanted to point out before we move on as well, when we talk about sort of characters and performances, the voice cast of this film is just ridiculously stacked, which almost feels like it should be a bigger deal than it is. It's unfortunate that it hasn't turned out to be like this incredible thing that everyone goes, that's not just that's the best CGI movie, which we may or may not be the opinion. I guess we'll get to that at the end. But, you know, with this voice cast, it should have been like the best Resident Evil thing, because it's got Johnny Young Bosch, Kyle Hebert, Troy Baker, Yuri Lowenthal as just random people. Karen Strassman is in it, who went on to play Annette. We have Keith Silverstein as a random voice in it as well, aka formerly, well, always Hunk.
He still is Hunk. Yeah.
He is still Hunk, but rather he's not playing Hunk in this. He's just a random voice. Kirk Thornton plays the United States president. I think he gets one line. Michael McConaughey, who is Barry Burton in Revelations 2 eventually, plays the CEO of Will Farmer. Steve Bloom is Greg. Michelle Ruff is Rani. Crispin Freeman is Frederick Downing. Roger Craig Smith, of course, is Curtis Miller, who goes on to play Chris after having already played Billy in Umbrella Chronicles. We've just said Laura Bailey's in this. It's a ridiculous cast. Like, it's all-star, like, voiceover cast. It's just a shame that the writing didn't really support that level of quality, unfortunately. But we'll get into...
Roger Craig Redfield got about 2 lines.
Yeah, which is probably for the best, because otherwise it'd be like, all I can hear is Chris. I know he wasn't Chris in 2008, but like, all I can hear is Chris now. Let's talk about the visuals of the film, because as I say, this is the first CGI production, so it's a big deal at the time. A full-length CGI Resident Evil movie. How has it aged, Jen?
Okay. Again, with the dichotomy, this movie, parts of it look really, really amazing. A lot of the set pieces. There's a part like right at the beginning when it shows the outside of the airport. That could be real footage. That's really good animation. Like, wow. So yeah, environmentally, everything looks fantastic. Wow, great CGI. You know, I'm in. But then we look at people's faces, and oh dear. Especially Leon again. I hate that, because Leon's my favorite. I don't know, most people know this about me, but Leon's my bae. I hate that I just used that word. I think I might just kick myself off. Anyway, yeah, he and what was he doing? And they just forgot to animate him.
Yeah.
I don't
Seems
know.
like
Maybe they just forgot. But my main gripe is, and will always be, I don't think Capcom in any way, shape, or form have ever nailed it to this day, except for maybe in 4 Remake, the hair. I can't. Angela's hair when it's down makes me want to cry.
Yes,
I
was
why
waiting
is it
for that.
Underwater? What? And it's the same thing as in 7 with Mia's hair. It looks like it's underwater. What is this animation going on? People's hair does not move like that. Just look at a human being standing there with their hair.
Yep.
It's not going wee.
I'm really glad, because you guys were talking about that scene with the flowery dress, but I wasn't paying any attention to anything else, because there's like a 30-second long shot from behind them where there's wind blowing, but you wouldn't really know it because not a lot of stuff was moving. It's just Angela's hair flowing around like a jellyfish. Like that. It's so distracting.
Horrendous.
That's where Leon's personality is.
It's all in there. That's where the animation went.
Yeah. They blew their budget on animating her hair. They should have just left it in a ponytail. It'd be fine. But weird. Yeah, I don't know. Environmentally, I think it looks amazing still and it holds up. But the CGI of the actual characters, not great. The only one that's really banging is Claire. Again, I think they threw their entire budget into Claire. A little wink to Leon. That was a great little piece of animation. I loved that. And then Leon just no-sold it completely. It was just like, whatever. Beautiful girl winking at me. Don't care.
Right. That sums up his entire thing. What's going on? I don't know. Whatever. James, how do you feel about the visuals of Degeneration?
Yeah, like Jen said, the backgrounds and the stationary elements in this movie are really good. They do very, very well. Like, yeah, the airport looks fantastic, and like especially the end where Tricell are going through all the detritus after the explosion. It looks really good until the moving parts come onto the screen. The people, because you really see kind of the if there was a budget, you'd really see where things were cut. Another interesting thing with Claire is that you got so much emotion in her face. Like you saw a lot of the sassiness with her when she was talking to people. Whereas you didn't really get that a lot of other people, because I feel like with Angela, she was mostly just pouting. And they spent
it was
like
all
a lot.
lips.
Yeah, they just spent so much money, putting so much time into those lips for some reason, and maybe the hair and the dress, but
And the push-up.
and the push-up bra, yeah, of course. But that was a stationary element; it didn't wibble wobble, so we were.
Where was the jiggle
Shocking,
physics there?
Shockingly,
I've seen Capcom put jiggle physics into the most ridiculous things, and yet we got no Angela jiggle physics. I robbed.
But because of like the lack of animation, we have these. I mentioned it earlier, but we have these really long blank stares that were constantly happening. That there was nothing behind. Again, pouting, arms looking broken to all heck while holding hands as well. I don't know if anyone noticed that, but Leon's arm looked like it dislocated from his shoulder.
Man's had a long day.
So it did look great. I think I do want to praise the lighting, though. I think lighting saved a lot of this movie. Even though there's still a lot of bad things in the movie, I think if it wasn't for lighting, this would just be dog water to look at.
Yeah.
Like, it would be absolutely horrible. Like, they did quite well with the lighting, especially with the environments as well. Though a lot of the environments are either dark, or you got like very acute angles to look through. But yeah, it was there was also like you got to see a really good representation of lighting when you saw Angela looking at Gertis while he was slow walking across the screen, and you got the close up of her face. Like, I know that, forget all like the pouting and everything, like they did really well the lighting in that room and her face as well. But yeah, other than that, everything was poo poo.
I think it's fine. It's about as best as I can describe it. It is a bit of a weird mixed bag, as you guys have said, in terms of what is good and what isn't good. What hasn't been pointed out, I think the zombies look kind of silly in this movie. A lot of them have, I don't know, they seem to be wearing black lipstick a lot of the time, which is a choice, I guess.
I never noticed that.
I don't know, maybe that was just me, or there was one particular zombie at least. It was like, you've got very black lips. I'm not quite sure what's going on here, but I thought the zombies looked kind of dumb for the most part. I think, it's obviously the most haggard of the films, but it is the oldest, so it's going to happen. And I think the texture and detail-wise, it's not great, but it's perfectly watchable. But yeah, it's not exactly.
I just had a revelation.
Yeah.
Now I know why Leon's a plank. It's the jacket. The entire time
he's been wearing a wooden jacket.
The entire time he's wearing that jacket, he never moves his arms. Really, like at all.
He's wearing a medium.
But as soon as he takes that jacket off, he suddenly becomes more animated. Only slightly, but in that whole sort of end sequence when he takes the jacket off, and suddenly he can run, he can jump, he can he can hold hands, he can kiss underwater, he can do all these things. And then he puts the jacket back on and he's back to being a plank.
So the jacket's the true antagonist
of the film.
That's
the limiter, you see.
It's obviously a brand new leather jacket that he got after 4, and it's stiff as all hell. He hasn't waxed it or anything yet. So it's just like, I can't move, help me, for the love of God. Yeah.
That's the blank stare. It's his help me stare.
I think this jacket's trying to kill me.
Yeah.
Oh dear.
Steve, how do you feel about the visuals of Degeneration?
I feel like 3D anime films tend to get a lot of stick for looking low budget. They can't all be Advent Children, which came out a few years before. And video game films in general also have a big stigma. To ride that gamut in them and be, I'd say, acceptably mid, generally speaking. I feel like some of the characters' weird soft focus faces do me in. I honestly feel like you mentioned the zombies, and I can't unsee the Dead Rising zombies. That's what they look like to me. This looks more like a Dead Rising film with Resident Evil characters in it at times. Especially with the way that some of the faces look almost photo scanned in and then stuck on a 3D model. Not so much protagonists, but side characters and so on. I think it looks okay. Generally speaking, the standouts are Claire, G. Curtis, what a pair. But to get a G-Virus monster on screen and it looks, it's its own unique thing, sure. But you can tell at least that it's a big, horrible beastie monster. You can tell the skin texture isn't quite just greebly. It's this weird leatheriness to it. It's all right. I like it. Zombies are a bit meh, as we pointed out. Generally speaking, the backgrounds and stuff, I feel like we're in a video game set. This feels like just above an in-engine cutscene at times.
Yeah.
Which isn't necessarily a bad thing. But then I look at stuff from Resident Evil past, like the Outbreak intro is king, Jesus. In comparison to this, and that came out 2002. That's a good 6 years lead up you had. But no, generally speaking, I think it's okay. It's adequate for Saturday morning special that this kind of has that vibe going for.
Outbreak's a great comparison because Outbreak wouldn't have had. I don't know. I have no idea what the budgets of either of these things were, but I would always compare this to something like RE5, which came out the next year, which obviously looks gorgeous, as we talked about in the previous episode. But obviously that had a lot more money put into it because it was a flagship game, whereas this probably didn't. But yeah, when you compare it to something like a side game like Outbreak, it's a very good point. Before we get to conclusions then, anybody got anything on sound, music, sound effects? Steve, any thoughts on the way the film sounds?
Oh, goodness me. You know what? The music completely washes over me. I don't think I can name a single piece. If you played the soundtrack to me,
sure.
that was full, wallpaper.
Yeah. Yeah, I think there's some earlier stuff. I couldn't pick it out of a lineup, definitely, but while watching it this week, there's some stuff early on that's creepy, that's very reminiscent of the games that kind of I enjoyed in context. Don't know out of context if it would be great, but yeah. I
tell a lie, actually. Me and Mrs. Steve, when we were watching this most recently, she pointed out when they go into the Will Farmer facility for the first time, she looks at me and goes, "That sounds like a save room theme, Stephen." I don't know why she used the Sunday name, but there we go. So yeah, that's my standout, courtesy of Mrs. Steve.
James, any thoughts on sound of the film?
I listened to the entire soundtrack a couple times, and I didn't remember any of them being in the movie.
Nice.
But I liked the tracks. Like, there's one called Breakthrough, which is kind of rock. It's rock inspired, and it was in a very action heavy scene, and I liked that song. But yeah, I couldn't really place where this music was. I watched it after watching the movie 3 times, so I wasn't going to watch it again. But yeah, the music is fine on its own to listen to. I do recommend it to folks because there's a lot of music there that sounds very Resident Evil.
Yeah.
Capcom does very well with their music. But as with all of my segments today, there is a downside to the actual sound work, and that is I'm very sensitive to high squealing or pitch sounds. There were so many in this movie. There was one particular one where it kept fluctuating up and down, and I had to actually turn my volume all the way down, so I missed the music, I missed the sound of what was going on, as well as the high pitched squealing. And yeah, I'm really sensitive to that. It makes me cringe and it gives me headaches. Please stop doing that, movies. It's not good. It doesn't convey anything good. But yeah, other than that, yeah, it was okay, and I would recommend listening to the soundtrack.
Nice, fair enough. Jen, any thoughts on sound effects and music?
Entirely forgettable stock music. It could have been. I don't remember a single track. The only thing I remember is the final song, the title song, whatever it is, being some god awful early 90s rock thing that had absolutely nothing to do with what just happened in the movie. Something about love and
push-up bras.
Yeah, well, not even. I mean, if it had been a song about push-up bras and girls in beautiful dresses, then I would have got it. But it wasn't. It was something about losing the love of your life. I was like, well, they only just met, so I don't think they're that deep. Yeah, no, I have no real notes on that. Fair. It's just music that was there.
It sure was. Right, okay, let's sum it up then. Let's talk conclusions. How do we feel about Degeneration overall? And actually, Jen, since you're a guest, why don't you start? And specifically, since we haven't covered Damnation and Vendetta, I don't necessarily, if they'd like to, people can say where they'd rank them all or whatever. But Jen, since you're guesting, how does this sit amongst the CGI films for you, if you have a take on that?
I have kind of two different rankings for this. As far as the stories go of the CGI movies, if we're just talking the CGI movies, I think it's probably the best story. So it would be up there at number one for me of all of the CGI movies. It's the one that makes the most sense. It's the one that's trying the hardest to kind of appeal to Resident Evil fans. It's got a solid little story. I mean, it's nothing groundbreaking, but it's there. It all makes sense, and yay, woohoo! You did a good job. So it would be number one story wise, but characterization wise, it's
all over the place.
Yeah, I mean, I think. Let me think. What would be my rank? I'm not going to rank them all for you right here, but I'm just thinking where I would put it, characterization wise and everything else wise. Probably at like 4. It's not good. It's not. No. Obviously, there's the limitations of the time, so that works against it. But it's not great. So yeah, but it's just again the dichotomy of this movie to me. Great story, not so great everything else. So
fair.
That's my ranking.
Fair. Yeah, it's certainly an odd one, and I think what makes it maybe speaks to the wider series is that I would describe this up until recently to people as, it's the best one of a bad bunch, which obviously I was quite positive about Death Island, so I think that probably is my favourite one when it comes to pure popcorn fluff nonsense. But this is, it's close enough for me. It's sizably more interesting than the other two. I'll say that much, but we'll get to those. But yeah, it's okay. I don't think it's bad. Certainly, there's a lot of decent stuff to take from it. Even though I think we've gone through this entire hour and a half basically just calling it a complete mess. But there are positives to take from it, even if most of them, yes, are Claire Redfield. James, what's your final thoughts on Degeneration?
Despite everything, like I've said, I've critiqued this movie over it. I agree. It's still the best of the bunch when looking at the other CGI movies. I mean, overall scoring. I mean, there are clearly leaders in other sections, but I think overall it's the best of the bunch. Capcom, they're always trying to tap into the potential of translating their games into movies, and while this may have not hit the mark for me, I can see the potential in it. Maybe Capcom can learn from all the bad mistakes of these movies and actually deliver something well received one day. Until then, like a good Capcom stan, I watch every mistake they make.
Well said. Well said. And Steve, how do you feel about Degeneration overall?
How can I follow up that? Oh man. I, generally speaking, I know we've all ripped it a new one, but I think enjoyably mid. There are a lot of things I don't like about this film, but then Claire's there and she's awesome, so that helps a lot, really. And I'm not even a Claire stan. I was like, yeah, she is, brilliant, fantastic. Leon is apparently checked out, so I think if you're not a Resident Evil fan, you can do the same, really. Why are you listening to this podcast if you're not a Resident Evil fan? Absolute legend. I appreciate you. Get help. But no, I don't hate it, but I certainly don't rate it.
Nice. Well, nothing else remains for me but to thank our contributors, our patrons, and our listeners. Join the First Aid Spray Discord server to become part of our community and hear the show early and unedited. And don't forget to follow us on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, TikTok. All of these links and all of our content can be found at faspraypod.com. You can listen to the podcast on YouTube, Spotify, iTunes, and all good podcasting apps. And if you like what you hear, please do leave us a review where you can and spread the good word. Don't forget you can support the show by picking up some merch or at patreon.com/faspraypod for as little little as $1 a month. As previously alluded to, in our next episode, we go back to the first season of First Aid Spray to revisit what was, at the time, a brand new game, to see how we feel about it as it hits its first big anniversary. Join us as we celebrate 5 years of Resident Evil 2's remake. Thank you to the panel. You can follow all of us individually. I'm at Cyniac_123. Steve is at FB Steve Was Taken. James is on Blue Sky now. Links in the description. I've got to find an easier way to do that. And you can follow Jen on Twitter at Jen Von Lee. And finally, thank you for listening and have a good week.
I also want to add a picture of what I am dealing with right now. Where would I put this?
There is a chat attached to the actual call, but
this is what I've been dealing with the entire time.
If it's Kato, put it in pet pics.
Oh, also
pet pics. Where
there
are
is
we?
a pet pics.
By the way,
there we go.
Everyone who's hung out through the chat all the way through, I appreciate you all. Somehow me and Sonny are like going, yeah, FF7 really did.
You had a sidebar.
Yeah, I've cat pic added. This is what I've been dealing with this the whole time. Just sitting on my lap, on my laptop.
The little leg.
My legs are dead. Silly Bean. She just wants to be involved. Can Bean be your next guest?
Yes, 100%.
Yeah.
Yeah. Did you hear that, Bean? Oh, she left.
Oh, now she's got attention. She's going. I see how it is.
No, actually, no.
So, no photos, no autographs, please.
we should have a podcast, just pets.
Yes.
Pets.
Just purring for 2 hours.